Hello and welcome back to Bigfoot Lake. If this is your first time here, pull up a chair and sit around the campfire as we sit here on the shore of Bigfoot Lake and tell some stories. Tonight we share three stories. I should say three amazing stories of Bigfoot encounters. So, without any further ado, let's dive into the first of our three stories. The title of the first encounter is My Older Siblings and I Encountered a Bigfoot in 1978. Here is the encounter. In 1978, I lived on a 600-acre farm in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky. My family has owned it for generations. We worked the farm and would be out after dark. One night, we were walking home from the tobacco patch. We encountered what I can only describe as a Bigfoot. It wasn't aggressive, but it ran when it saw us. It didn't walk like the fake ones on the internet. It walked more like a huge primate, an ape, but upright. The smell was a strong ammonia, like cat urine, but way stronger. My sister was 18 at the time, and I was 9. Plenty old enough to know that we had seen something. I hadn't even heard of Bigfoot at that time. We had just seen Star Wars a few days before, so I thought that I had seen a Wookiee. My older brother said, "Heck no, that was a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot." We told our mom, and she said her grandmother had talked about seeing them. Anyways, the interesting thing is I was reading an article about these paleontologists that searched for evidence of this creature in different parts of the United States. And one of those places was right here in the Appalachians. I found it interesting that they found petrified fecal samples from a long thought extinct type of large primate. You can still Google this article. So that's our first encounter, dating from back in 1978 in the Appalachians. What do you guys think about that first encounter? Anybody listening from the Kentucky area? Maybe even from eastern Kentucky where this report comes from? I'd love to hear if any of you have encountered anything like this, which was brought forth from this family encounter. Next, we move on to our second story of the night. The story begins, I've always followed Bigfoot as I found it very interesting. I think I've always been probably 50-50 on its existence. The only reason I gave it the possibility it was real was the amount of first-hand witness accounts. None of the videos that are out prove anything. Witness accounts have always been the most credible evidence that Bigfoot is real. Well, today I went moose hunting in the great state of Maine. My old man won a moose hunting lottery ticket. He's an NP here at the local ER. He works with a nurse who also happens to be a hunting guide. He joined us yesterday for the hunt as a guide. He is in his 40s and I'm almost 40. He has been a guide since he was 20 and has spent his entire life hunting in the woods here. After he told me this of course, I had to ask about Bigfoot, since he has spent his entire life in the woods and around others who have done so as well. Here is his story. After asking him about any Bigfoot experiences, he says he had an encounter about 20 years ago. He prefaced it by stating he's never been a believer in the paranormal and won't say if it was even Bigfoot. So, here's the rest of the story. While he was guiding some hunters on a bear hunt, he would set up bait barrels with all sorts of sweet treats. Not too far away, he would drop his hunter off. at his designated tree stand by the bait barrel. It was the end of the day, so he went to go pick his hunter back up. When he is halfway there to get the hunter, he hears an extremely loud whoop, followed by a few more. He said he has spent his entire life in these woods and has never heard anything like it, and he is absolutely terrified. As he is walking, he can clearly hear footsteps trailing him. He can't see anything because it's dark. He said he had his pistol out because he was that scared and did not know what it was. Next thing he knows, he hears a very loud crash. He said he's not sure what it was, but said it could have been something thrown, like a log or a dead tree being pushed over. He finally gets to his hunter, and his hunter is shaking. His hunter relays that he has been hearing loud whoops as well, and that something was walking around behind his position for 30 plus minutes before he showed up. They both hightailed it out of there. That's the story. Again, he ends it saying he doesn't know what it was and won't even say if it could possibly be a Bigfoot. So that's certainly an interesting encounter from someone very experienced in the woods as a hunting guide, and that classic whoop sound that he heard. And as we read, the hunter also heard it multiple times with loud crashes and footsteps. So that story came from Maine. Do we have anybody here listening that's from that Maine area that possibly could give any more insight on the wilderness in that region? Are there more reports that you know of from that area in Maine? We'd love to hear from you, so let us know. So we move on to our third story of the night. This story comes from an ex-farmhand on a ranch in Manitoba, Canada. So this ex-farmhand has shared a terrifying encounter with a massive beast attacking their farmhouse in the dead of night, which she claims was Bigfoot. She worked as a ranch helper in Manitoba, Canada in 1981, when one evening she was interrupted from working in an oat shed by a large bang. When she went outside, the horses had bolted, but a large creature was standing close by and growled in her direction. Describing the ordeal, she said, "I worked on a horse farm in Manitoba, and on this one winter night I went to the oat shed when I heard a wham against the back wall. It scared the heck out of me. I left the shed and expected to see the geldings, but there aren't any. I then heard shuffling next to me in the shadows behind the shed. I backed up until I could see a head and shoulders taller than the line of the shed. It looked one way, then the other, and turned back, staring at me. In this moment, I didn't have a clue what I was looking at, and then it growled. Not a loud screaming growl, but more of a rumbling, and I could feel it vibrating in my chest. I panicked, and I ran for the barn to get my helper and tell her what I just saw, fearing for the geldings. We both ran back with pitchforks, and it was still there. It again looked one way, the other, and came back, looking at us. And again, that rumbling growl. We were screaming at it, and it leaned and jumped into the paddock and ran off. They were joined by the farmer armed with a shotgun, but it did not reappear. Around 3 a.m., they were woken by the police, who told them the horses had escaped. When they returned, they found the terrified animals had run through a wire fence, taking out a post in the process. The next morning's newspaper added to the intrigue, as it included a tale of a police patrolman who reported seeing a tall, hairy thing which jumped across a 10-foot fence. She added, "We just looked at each other like, no way." A few things started making sense, like the oats having to be ordered 2 weeks earlier than normal, the nest made in the straw bales under the blue tarp out back, and the morning when turning the mares out, they usually beelined for the door. But this particular morning they ran in circles just beyond the door and came bolting back into the barn. This encounter was almost 40 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday, and I am still scared to see one. So that's the conclusion of our third story. And this is someone very familiar with horses. They know how these animals act. And oftentimes you can hear stories of animals having that sixth sense when it comes to danger being around. So there's a reason why these horses wouldn't leave the barn. When they stepped out, they bolted right back in. So if you know any stories from this Manitoba, Canada area, again, we would love to hear them. Not really familiar with the forest in the Manitoba area, so if you have any insights to any Bigfoot sightings or any sightings of anything mysterious in that region, again, we would love to hear from you, so we could share your stories here at Bigfoot Lake. And the more people that come forward with their stories, it's just an encouragement for other people to step forward. So, what do you guys think of our 3 stories for tonight? Please leave a comment, and if you enjoyed them, hit that thumbs up. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more stories, and even hit that bell. So, thanks for joining us here tonight at Bigfoot Lake. We appreciate each and every one of you. Hope you had a good time, and have a great night. We'll see you on the next.